Hi, Stevo again. I put two videos on my Twitter feed of the raw footage of George Floyd, and I hope that Twitter doesn't take the feed off because I want a lot of the people to see the George Floyd apprehension, and I'm pretty sure the world has already saw it, and was just crazy. They just was. How could this situation happen? And I've talked about George Floyd before, but I just woke up and it's about 6 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, 6:34 to be exact in the morning, and it just like I've said before, George Floyd is me. George Floyd is me. And I've tried to think about this and think about this, and try to figure out, why we can't modernize our police the way other countries around the world. England has different types of police. They have police without guns, and they have police with guns, and it depends on the actual situation that they use guns. The English very rarely use guns. It has to be a very violent situation where they call the police that have guns. And I think with the situation, especially in Texas, where a Texas female police officer went into the wrong apartment, thinking it was her apartment, and she killed Botham Jaw. And I think that was crazy. That she killed him in his own apartment, told him to stand up with his hands up, and still she shot him dead in his own apartment. So it's just crazy to me that American police, that's all they care about, is they shoot people before they ask questions. And especially, people of color. And I think we need to modernize our police. I think we definitely need to look to European ideas to modernize the police. We can't just have people shooting and killing, especially people of color. In the situation with George Floyd, he had an anxiety attack. If you see the raw video, you can understand that George Floyd was having an anxiety attack. You can understand it. You can understand it. And all they had to do before they pushed George Floyd in the back seat of the police car was to just calm him down, and it only takes a couple minutes to calm him down, and he would have gladly went in the back seat of the car. This was basic police 101, with the apprehension of George Floyd. It was basic police 101. I don't feel sorry for the police whatsoever in the situation of George Floyd. And people could say, oh, he was doing drugs. Well, him doing drugs and him having an anxiety attack is two different things. Him doing drugs and him having an anxiety attack are two different things. He wasn't that high to the point that he knew what he was doing, where he was, and all that. He knew what he was doing. So he wasn't that fucking high. So to say that, oh, he was high on drugs and da-da-da-da-da-da, oh, he's going to kill us. And George Floyd was a middle-aged black man. As you could see, yeah, he was a biggins, but he was still a middle-aged black man. He wasn't 18 years old or anything like that. and he wasn't going to run from the police or anything like that. And you could see that he conformed to everything that the police was asked him to do. You know, because he's been through that. Did done that with the police. He's probably been arrested by the police and harassed by the police many times. So he knows the score. So he knew, George Floyd knew exactly what he was doing. So his anxiety attack and him doing drugs are two different things. They're two different things. And that's what makes me angry, is that we need to modernize our police, and we need to acknowledge that people in the inner city do have mental illness. And we need to recognize that I've known a lot of people with mental illness. I have mental illness. But I know a lot of people with mental illness who do illegal drugs instead of the drugs that their psychiatrist gives them, or drink a lot and not take their medication that the psychiatrist gives them. And that's what they should do, is take their medication that the psychiatrist prescribes them. But if you're African American and you're not really, historically, African Americans don't trust doctors. They don't trust doctors because we had segregated hospitals back in the 50s. Back in the 50s and 60s, there were segregated hospitals between black and white people. And there's still African Americans who don't trust doctors. And there's still African Americans who go through denial about mental illness, who don't even know they have mental illness. So they do drugs, illegal drugs, and they consume a lot of alcohol, which isn't right. They should take their medication. They should, not do alcohol while they're doing medication, and not mix it together and everything. But hopefully in the future, people of color will acknowledge that they have mental illness. There's nothing wrong with having mental illness. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you an incomplete person. There's no such thing in the world as a perfect person. It just is. It has a lot to do with your environment and your genetics. And all you got to do is take your medication that the doctor prescribes you. If you have any setbacks, talk to your doctor. It's simple as that. And African Americans, people of color in America, they don't trust the doctor. They don't trust doctors. So we need to modernize the police in America. And we need to have the police understand that there are people, poor people, that have mental illness. And all they had to do was to calm George Floyd down, and he would have gladly went in back of the police car. Gladly. No problem. And they could have took him to the police station and do what they needed to do. Made sure that $20 bill, that phony $20 bill, was it a phony? Was it not a phony? I'm still wondering if that $20 bill was a phony. Now, the main thing that I wanted to bring out is that Joe Biden put together one of the most far right-wing federal police legislation in a long time. And Joe Biden was this was during the Bill Clinton administration, when Bill Clinton wanted to get a second term, and the remnants of the Reagan Revolution, who were very conservative people, were still in Washington, D.C., Newt Gingrich and people like that. And the House of Representatives and the Senate were the majority, and they had to work with the House. The Democrats had to work with the House of Representatives, with the Republicans. And so the Democrats had to be more Republican than the Republicans. So they did put together very conservative legislation. And Bill Clinton wanted to get a second term. So Bill Clinton put together, with Joe Biden, very conservative federal legislation when it came to crime bills that didn't benefit people of color in inner cities. And that crime bill still exists. You got to understand, Joe Biden is a very he's very much of a person that is, wanted to get ahead through the years as a politician, and he knew where his bread was buttered. He knew he was a Democrat in name only. And I think what Joe Biden needs to do when he becomes president, and I hope he does become president for many reasons, because we got a dodo bird in office right now. We got a crazy nut in office. And the thing is that Joe Biden could be another LBJ. LBJ was a Dixiecrat. He didn't give a damn about black people when he was the head of the Senate. But once LBJ became the president of the United States, he had enough power to put together legislation that was very ahead of its time, and he I guess in a way LBJ did redeem himself. But these people are politicians, and these people are very ambitious. Joe Biden and LBJ are ambitious people, and they'll do anything to butter their bread. And ever since the time George McGovern lost to Richard Nixon, the Democrats had to be more conservative than the Republicans. And it's been that way since 1972, when George McGovern lost to Richard Nixon in Richard Nixon's second term. The Democrats had to compete with the Republicans, and they had to be more conservative to the Republicans. And then Reagan came along, and he was more conservative than anybody. And then the Democrats had to be more conservative than Reagan. And so these politicians, they're competing with each other, and what they need to do is to stop doing that. And I think Joe Biden needs to go back to what he did in the 90s with this federal legislation, crime legislation, and modernize it, and maybe modernize it in a progressive mode. And I think Joe Biden is a type of politician that would listen. And maybe I'm wrong, but it's a two-party system. And like I always say, and it's a two-party system. It's a two-party system. And Joe Biden put together that bill because he knows where his bread is buttered. So it's early in the morning, and I guess I'm meandering, and maybe I'm not saying the things that I should say. I'm always trying to beat this clock here, because I don't want this video to get longer, So please vote, and I'll see you when I see you.